All right, welcome to the roundtable of the Youth Development Conference here in Vienna. Next to me there is Des Ryan and Mike Young. We already have nearly the half of the conference behind us. Now we are just going to talk about a few things. Before we start, I would like to hand over to you to give a short introduction. What are you doing currently at Setanta and with LTAD network, and to give our viewers a short insights into your daily business.
I'm Mike Young. It's been a pleasure to join EINS-A coaching at this conference. It's a very switched on coaching body and a pleasure to speak with Des and a welcoming group. I am representing LTAD network, which I feel, in my biased opinion, is probably the greatest resource on long-term athletic development available in a publicly accessible way on the internet for certain, and perhaps everywhere. We have brought together practitioners from a variety of fields and experts, ranging from sports science and women's coaching and growth and maturation and development in a variety of different sporting disciplines, and provided their intellect and knowledge in a manner that is available via a monthly subscription. Perhaps the crown jewel of the LTAD network is really our YPD model, which was developed in conjunction with several experts in the field and led by my colleague and friend James Baker. And it is, I believe, the most full encompassing model that exists for long-term athletic development. So this conference theme is something that we're very passionate about, and very appreciative that we were given an opportunity to be a platform and I can represent LTAD network.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Des Ryan. I'm the Director of Coaching and Performance at Setanta College. I'm really looking forward to this event. I really do love everything about long-term athletic development. It's so important, it's so complex, it's so interesting. Short background on myself. In Setanta, I lecture, I support national governing bodies, I do a lot of varied things. So in Setanta, we deliver degrees, certificates, masters. We also work with world governing bodies like World Rugby, national governing bodies, and sports clubs. Prior to that, I worked in Arsenal Academy as head of sports medicine and athletic development for 9 years. So I'll be sharing lots of insights from that. We'll be having lots of discussions about that. And prior to that, I worked in Irish Rugby, again in Academy, for many years. So looking forward to asking everybody here lots of questions and being asked hard questions by everybody here.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we will hear a lot of growth and maturation tomorrow from your side, Des. Looking forward to that. So I already told you, I will gonna ask you a few questions, and I will start with something Mike used as an analogy a few times this day. Like he said, when you're on a deserted island, what would you take with you? And I'm going to ask you this question now, like, when you're going to a deserted island, and in this case, you're only allowed to use one of the conditional skills, like strength, speed, agility, mobility, endurance, which would you take and why? I would start with you, Mike.
Sure. So these are always quite polarizing questions, but I do think they're very valuable in that they are a thought experiment that makes us really create a hierarchy of what we value in our training or anything else. It's a little bit of a trick question. And I will provide probably a little bit of a trick answer. If I were to, I have been given about 10 minutes to think this over, and I know that I can distill it down into 3 potential options. One of them would be a loaded sprint, so a resisted sprint. Another one might be a clean and jerk, and another one might be a full range of motion squat. And the reason I would choose these is because they can all check multiple boxes. If I do a loaded sprint, I will certainly see a high neuromuscular output. I'll be able to develop power output. I will have some bleed over in terms of the adaptations to even strength. It is perhaps the most singularly active activity that we will see in sport in terms of the motor unit recruitment. Likewise, a clean and jerk is somewhat of a cheat code for exercise. We're involving a hinge, we're involving a squat, we're involving a lunge in the catch position of the jerk. We're certainly involving bracing anytime we're holding the bar either overhead or at shoulders. And we have, of course, a press with a jerk. So it's technically on paper one exercise, but it's really at least 5 different movement patterns. So that might be one of my answers. And then the final one might be a deep squat. Again, I realize I've taken 3 items to my deserted island, but a deep squat I think checks the box in ways of mobility and strength. And you can even do that activity in particular for conditioning. So I could do a deep squat and really work on lumbo-pelvic hip mobility and ankle range of motion. I could do it heavily loaded and work on muscular strength. I could do jump squats and work on power output. Or I could do high repetition sets, and perhaps it's an aerobic stimulus or a anaerobic glycolytic type stimulus. So the commonality, I'm not sure which one I would choose of the 3, is that I'm trying to check multiple boxes with one of these different stimuli and trying to find a way to be the most efficient with my singular task. So difficult question. I don't have it down to one, but any one of those would be a suitable option for me on my deserted island.
Now, I'm going to stretch the truth in this story. So you never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So this island has a young under-14 team on it, and I have to train them. Now, there's only so much room on my boat, so I don't want to put in dumbbells or discs or bars because I want my comforting things like my TV and whatnot and my laptop and so on. So I'm going to think now, I've got to train these people on this island. I can only do one thing now. And I'm going to dive into my philosophy. And everybody should be aware of what their philosophy is in athletic development. Everybody should be aware of what the coach's philosophy is, who you're working with. So my philosophy is very centered around movement. So I'm going to be a very broad answer, one thing, movement. So these young people on this island, when I'm not on my laptop or watching TV, I'm going to be training them. And they're going to do great mobility and stability. They're going to do wonderful movement challenges. They're going to be such efficient movers in terms of how they run, sidestep, change direction. They're going to, if they do play a game, let's say they play tag rugby, and they're going to have amazing game speed. And then I don't need any equipment. I can make them stronger with their body weight and whatever else is around the island, and with maybe going up in high reps. And I can do a full athletic development program with just one word, movement, is all. And I've loads of room on my boat to bring other things.
Thank you. Yeah, as you said, very polarizing. I expected not that good answers, but very good answers anyway. So thanks for that. So coming to a question or something which hasn't been discussed this weekend yet. It's about load management. We all know load management in pro, elite, adult athletes looks like analyzing GPS data, using wellness questionnaires to figure out how they feel, and so on. Yeah, the list is long. But in youth athletes, it's tricky. Simply, nearly no one uses GPS in 11 years old, so you don't have the data. Normally, we talked about that polysportive idea to educate those young athletes means that they are moving in so many different ways. What are your thoughts on load management with youth athletes?
So the club that I work with does attempt to do load management with some of their players. They run into the same issues that you have mentioned. I work with the pro side of the club, but the club is quite large and does have an academy that goes from around 11 years all the way up through the pro level. They have access to the best GPS units available. However, they don't have the staffing necessarily to look after all of it. And even if they did, it becomes logistically very difficult to get clean data, to cut the data, to analyze the data. So it's problematic on many of the levels that you already talked about. Even before we collect that data, my issue with this would be that we could be collecting the perfect data set within the session, but at that age and demographic, we can't control so many of the other variables. So I've come from sports where, as a coach, I can control all the variables, sports like Olympic weightlifting and track and field, and the coach is both the S&C coach as well as the sport coach oftentimes. I can control all of the variables. I don't even need a GPS to tell me what we did. I have it down to the meter of how much we've sprinted. In team sport, your data that you collect, your heart rate data, your GPS data, your wellness tracking, even that is a very granular look at what is happening on the larger scale, right? If someone had worked out on their own, if someone had a very stressful day or fight with their spouse or partner, these are effectively data points of life stressors that are not collected by my GPS or heart rate, perhaps even by my wellness questionnaire. So that's in an adult population when they live a relatively stable lifestyle. But with children, I think we run into an even more chaotic issue of what would be the value in tracking when you don't know how much your sample size is representative of this load in totality. And I ask that as a legitimate question, because would it be worthwhile to track this 90 minutes of their day that you have them and have no idea what's occurring during the rest of their day? Are they participating in a very active physical education class? In the States, you do club as well as your high school, perhaps, training. Maybe you're doing multiple sports, so there's players who are competing in 2 sports at the same time. And if all I did was track what I am doing, it might be very misleading. In fact, I remember actually taking a site visit to Arsenal, and I was actually told very similar. I believe it was Perry, who said, "We have kids and we don't know what they're doing. They might have 3 hours of practice, and sometimes they might practice with another club, we do collect all the data, but it is very difficult to make sense of it sometime." So I am legitimately unsure, but I would say that it is difficult and perhaps less necessary in a youth population to do anything more than an honest review of asking how athletes are feeling and trying to get some wellness and recovery metric. The actual output metrics, I think, would be very difficult to do unless you could somehow encompass the totality of everything they're doing on their day-to-day basis.
Yeah, great overview. And one of the big challenges in developing young people, and that's exactly the way it was in the academy in Arsenal. We had them for 4 or 5 times in the week, depending on the age group. We measured everything with GPS down to under 13s. But we didn't have when they were in school. We didn't have when they were away from us. We didn't have when they were playing in the street. So massive challenge. That's why I always say developing young people is so much harder than the adult first team sport. That's easy. You got one coach, you got 22 players, youth athletic development, you've got many teams, many stages of development, many coaches, many parents, many other sports, many other studies, way more complex. You have to be way more skilled to work with young people than the adults. I'm tongue-in-cheek there a little bit. But when I moved back to Ireland, we started looking after a county team. So that's an academy. Now, there's 300 players in that. So I had to make a decision. Do we give them diaries? Do we give them an app? Do we measure, get them to write everything down? Well, no, because there's only 9 of us, and we're not going to look through that. We're not going to have the time to look through 300. So we're doing a novel thing. We basically had a workshop with the parents, and I went through, watch out for this, be careful of that, this is okay. Is there one day off in the week? Do they have time for free play out in the street? Do they do 3 activities in the one day? If so, talk to us. And the players are there as well. It's a parent and player communication. Do they have 2 matches on the one day? Do they have 2 high-intensity activities side by side on the days? Are they doing too little? Do they have more than one day off in the week where they don't do physical activity? Come and talk to us. Other sports, introduce us to the coach of the other sport. So far, that's been going good. Anytime there's a flag like those things, the parent or player come to us and we modify. And we're very collaborative in spirit. So if there's another team that is training on the same night as us on another night, go train with that team and make sure the week is balanced. We don't want to say stop training with that team at under 14 level, etc. So it's not perfect, but it is having something in place, it is educating and it is supporting, and it's built around trust and respect. Now, the other thing, just adding on to it, don't get too caught up in the numbers. I say this to younger conditioners all the time. It's wonderful. GPS is wonderful. Data is wonderful. Readiness to train is fantastic. But it's like what Mike says. What else is going on in their life? It mightn't be physical activity. I was at a concert last night and I saw a person playing the violin for 2 hours. God, that was intense. But I'm sure it wouldn't be looked on as a physical activity in some eyes. But wow, that was intense to be able to do that that evening. So these young people will have other activities like that going on that is more than sport, that has to be understood and measured. And finally, I can go on, but a little story about GPS. During the COVID, I had to take a few return to play sessions. Important, we measured the load in that, the distance covered, the high-speed running, and I was given the session plan. I spoke to the physio, yeah, okay, how fast, how long, what distance, no problem. So me and the player went out, we did the session. It was an easy session. He couldn't go over 70%, it was only 45 minutes long. I did the session with him, he did his runs, it was only zigzag stage, and then we were going in and I went, I forgot my jacket. Run over there and get my jacket, please. So he ran down the pitch to get the jacket, and he ran back. And suddenly, there's 200 metres extra high-speed running. High-speed running was over, yeah, it's not that high speed, but because it was absolute, not relative. And we came in. And then suddenly, the young conditioner comes to me. Des, what did you do? You did 1,100 instead of 900 metres high-speed running. And I went, come here. Player, come over here. Physio, come over here. Player, are you sore? Tired? No. What do you have tomorrow? School? No activity? Sound? See you later. Physio, you okay with that? I didn't go over 70%, 45, yeah. Okay, thank you. See you later. And then I spoke to the conditioner. It's okay. He strided the length of a pitch, got my jacket, strided back. No one died. Hamstrings are okay. He's nothing tomorrow. Don't look just at the laptop. Look at the session with me. And look at the player is important when measuring load. Sorry, I'm going on, but I can do that.
No, good insights, good and a good point. Like, this is something you wouldn't count as a part of the session, but when you only look at the data, it's part of the session, and no one would care if someone would have seen this. Like, yeah. Cool. My next question is about LTAD. So this conference is about youth conference. It's called Youth Conference, and LTAD is a term which is used often simultaneously to youth. And we know, and you told us this in the beginning of your talk, that this is LTAD there is no youth in long-term athlete development. It's like it's never-ending story, isn't it? So a very important part, although in youth training, is gamification. Yeah, getting buy-in from the athletes. So my question now is, and I want to start with you, Des, now. Which part does gamification have, or how important do you think it is with older or even adult players when they are used to do this in the youth?
Yeah, sure. It's an important thing. I think the implementation I've been doing for a good while. The terminology gamification is relatively new, and there's some good resources out there. The Magic Academy, we had them speak. Russell Earnshaw speak with us, and he has cards, and it's based for adults and young people on how you can turn the session into a game, a computer game type things. So for sure, it's important for the adult players. They like to have be energized. They like to have fun. They like to be competitive. They like to have competition scores to play against each other, similar with the young people. But what I will say, have a method behind it, have a reason for it, coach within it. Don't just let something happen. Organise, lay something out and let it run its course. Why are you doing that game? Yes, there's laughter, there's fun, but what are you trying to achieve in that session? Players will never realise maybe that you're trying to achieve that. Are you working on a sidestep in the middle of that? Are you creating a game where there is a lot of sidesteps? Are you giving feedback to players during it? And similarly with adults. Now you have a very impactful session. Now you have a session with high buy-in because of the gamification, because of the enjoyment. But there's purpose behind it. There's meaning behind it. And what I will say to people is, if you haven't already, start reading around the area of skill acquisition. It's a language that's coming into the industry very quickly. It's a profession that's coming into the industry very quickly. It's new in terms of the science. There's fair amount of research out there, more needed. But we as professionals, be it sports scientists or strength conditioners, need to be able to work with these people. And a lot of what they're sharing is game-based approach, is like gamification, is that language of learning through the game. So a very important area. But I'm digressing again, I shouldn't. It's about energy, giving energy to the players, giving something for the players to look forward to. So they run to training, they don't saunter and walk slowly to training. And it's the same for adults, young adults, youths, children.
Yeah, great answer there. Before I go off on a tangent, I'll start with one and just follow up with what Des was saying about motor learning and skill acquisition. I had the luxury of having Dr. Richard McGill as my PhD advisor and starting my company with a motor learning would-be expert in Dr. Will Wu, who works primarily in the field of golf now, but has worked across multiple domains. And it is one of the most misunderstood but highly relevant sports sciences for coaches. Basically, how well do you communicate to achieve an end goal? I've heard a friend of mine once say that coaching is really all about putting an idea that is in my head into your head. That's pretty profound. If I see something and I'm trying to make that observation go from here to there, and it actually result in movement, how well can I communicate that? What is the practice design, the environment, the constraints, my language, my cueing, my type of feedback, timing of feedback? All of that is really important. So let me come back now and answer the original question of actual gamification. Of course, can include levels of skill acquisition into it. I think it's really important. Again, have a purpose to why you do it. I mentioned in my presentation this afternoon that we never want to do something and take the emphasis off of the physical development objective of the session. So whether that is including a sporting task or the ball or some form of gameplay, but also I think it's really important that at the end of the day, sport, even at the highest level, should be fun. It should be fun for everyone involved. If you work in professional sport, we sometimes come to think of it as a job, but really sport should be fun. And if we can make the tasks associated with being excellent in your sport fun, that's great. If we can use those same techniques to achieve a better physical outcome, like driving intent, like making it accountable, like making practices more competitive, then I think that can be useful. So I've gamified sessions where we put out timing gates and effectively create little micro races of athletes against each other. I've created gamification where we are using VBT, velocity-based training metrics, to compete against each other, or obviously creating situations where athletes are forced to compete against each other or chase one another or tag one another. And I think all of these are suitable for athletes of all ages. It works really well in youth populations, perhaps for a slightly different reason. It keeps them mentally engaged and can help you disguise the training as something that is truly fun. But even in adult populations, there's nothing wrong with the training being fun. And if we can use that same technique that makes it fun with making it more effective, it's a win-win scenario.
Thank you very much. You now said it several times, fun, which brings me to my last question. I would like to hear the funniest story you have ever experienced with a youth athlete in the gym.
I have two now, so I'm going to be greedy. So the first one, it's a player. I think I can mention his name. I know I can, because I'd be friendly with him now. Now, in a different way, more of an older uncle-y type way, because he's much younger than me. But when he was 14, his name is Joe Willock. He plays for Newcastle United. Very, very, very good player, and sold for the high 20 millions from Arsenal. So hugely talented. But when he was 14, he was a late developer, both physically and from maturity point of view, from a psychological, I suppose you'd call it. There was a gym session going on with the great Paddy Roach, the coach that is in Arsenal, and the players were doing elbow holds. And there was pockets in the jerseys of the training tops. And Joe, while he was doing an elbow hold, was reaching into the pocket and eating a sweet. And I was looking and going, what is he doing? Eating a sweet. So I didn't interfere. It's the coach's session. I chatted to the coach afterwards. Can we have a chat with Joe? And Joe, come here. What are you doing there in the session? Oh, I'm eating some sweets, bruv. And why are you eating them when you're exercising? They taste better. So I didn't test it out, but apparently sweets taste better. Now, we managed it appropriately. We chatted to him. You have to think of him, he was a 11, 12-year-old, hanging around all these 14-year-olds. We didn't want to be too hard on him. There is rules and repercussions. Yeah, he knew he shouldn't be eating sweets in the gym. It was quite funny to look at, and he learned from that. But that was an example of managing it appropriately to the stage of development, making sure the player knew what was right and what was wrong. And yeah, it was quite funny watching him eat sweets while he was doing a side elbow hold. The other one, I won't mention the player's name, but we were in the gym in the older venue where the first team was. So there was a first team player getting his massage from a massage therapist. We were just hanging around, and suddenly the massage therapist runs out the door. And where did he go? So we go over to the player and I went, what's wrong there? I thought there was something wrong. And he said, oh, he just got engaged. I went, right, well, why did he run out? I said I'd give him £10,000 if he goes to Paris and kisses another girl under the Eiffel Tower. So he did. And he did kiss a girl under the Eiffel Tower. He sent the picture and he got £10,000. That's the crazy world of the Premier League.
So this was several years back. I was training a group of higher level, bordering on elite level youth swimmers. So if you've ever worked with swimmers on their dry land training, you know that they are the human equivalent of fish out of water. They lack any significant level of motor control, especially in the youth stages. They glide through the water with significant skill and ease, something that most humans could never do. But if you put them on land, they look like they would trip over their own feet. So this is the context that we're working with this quite successful swimming group in handling all of their dry land training. We go to the pool. We have access to a pool deck that has benches on it that we can use for some of our dry land training, some bands, some light dumbbells, that kind of thing. It's not a full gym, but we can make do and provide a good resistance training environment for this group. As I mentioned, they're already at their best, what might be lovingly called a motor moron. They don't have the best coordination as a group. But there are some individuals within this group that were really, really lacking. So I remember one day we are doing bench dips. So imagine the feet are on the floor, the hands are on an elevated bench, and it is a tricep and shoulder exercise. It's not even quite like a parallel dip. It's a bench dip. Imagine that the hips should drop down to close to the floor, elbow is flexing significantly, and we push ourselves up. Some form of an upper body press, highly relevant to swimming because it's a very tricep-dominant upper body pull, back and tricep. So we're doing this, large groups, 20 to 30 at a time, usually just one coach, and it's rare that I'm actually coaching this group, but for some reason I happen to be on this particular day. They're reasonably well behaved, but it's a group of youth athletes. And I'm trying to coach the bench dip. And one athlete in particular is just doing what effectively looks like a very lewd hip thrust. So he's holding onto the bench. Picture this in your head. His hips are elevated and they're going up and down like this. The arms are remaining straight. No movement of the shoulder or tricep. None. Despite this being hilariously awkward movement, I'm trying to keep a straight face, and my first intuition as a coach is not to single this individual out, but to coach as a whole. I'll give cues to the group as a whole. Let's make sure we're bending our elbow. Let's make sure we drop if you do this right, your hips will drop close to the floor. All of the action will occur at the elbow. I'm going through this litany of cues. Some of them are externally focused. Your butt should run down the side of the bench. Your elbow should point up towards the ceiling. I'm literally exhausting all of my cues, some of which are following best practices of motor learning and skill acquisition. We've gone through several sets, and this guy is still doing this pelvic thrust with the straight arm. At this point, I say, bend your elbow, and I'm kind of getting aggravated at this point. And I go by and I tap his elbow. He's still not bending his elbow. And this is a group of 14 to 16-year-olds. Thankfully, they are higher level in terms of performance and had a very hard driving coach. Because at that moment, I lost my temper. This is now 5 or so minutes on, 3 sets into this. Multiple repetitions being ignored, using best practices of cueing and feedback and everything else. This is your fucking elbow. Bend your elbow. And that is what got it through to the kid. Everybody paid attention to me from that moment forward, but everything leading up to that point was some form of highly inappropriate hip thrust. Mind you, they came to dryland training also in their swimsuits. So if you can imagine what it looks like to do a inverted plank hip thrust in a swimsuit, 14 to 16-year-old boy, and it occur repeatedly after multiple attempts to correct the exercise, you can see why it was a tipping point for my aggravation.
Thank you very much for sharing. I can imagine that, and I'm not sure if I want to experience that as a coach. not sure. Yeah, might be a bit dangerous for my career. Thank you very much for that insights, for that very nice discussion. We're looking forward to another day of practical and theoretical work with you, Des. Thanks to you, Mike. It was a pleasure to have you here. And yeah, we will finish that day with a few drinks and chatting. And yeah, we'll see us tomorrow. Thank you.